So it's part 2 of lesson 8, and we've done a bit of an overview of how Google sign in, how the process is going to work and how we're going to integrate it, but we're going to go ahead and do that kind of step by step together right now. So probably the easiest way to get there, the link is right here on Blackboard. I'll put it in the chat as well. It may redirect us, but that's okay. I think they've changed the URL, but should still get us where we need to go. I'll put it in the chat. We can try this link. I'm just going to plug my computer in. So I'm going to use Chrome for this. Yeah, it does redirect. It's now console.cloud.google.com. They've changed it from console.developers. I'll maybe update the link on Blackboard, but there's a redirection there. But I may as well update it in my course material. As well, so you'll have the most current link. So we've got to put in a project name. So I will call it Positive Pets, and it's got to be unique. So you may need to put your student number in, because that will guarantee it will be unique. The organization, it can just stay as no organization. So this will be an umbrella project in the Google Cloud Platform for any APIs, any Google APIs we want to use with Positive Pets. We're only concerned with Google sign-in, but if we wanted other things like Google Maps, for example, we could put those APIs under this same umbrella project. So I'm just going to click Create. It's going to take a minute to create the project. And then when it's done, you'll get a notification with a little green check mark. You can just click the Select Project link in blue underneath. So Google Cloud, very similar to Azure. So we'll see a whole pile of things in the Google Cloud Platform, most of which we can ignore. So select your project.
Excuse me. So first I thought we were going to do the Facebook login or something.
You're going to do Facebook login as a lab after class. We're going to do Google login together first, because the Facebook process will be pretty similar. So we're going to do Google together, and then you're going to do Facebook either on your own, or for the lab, you can work with up to 2 classmates if you like.
Okay, so new project.
New project, give it a name.
Okay.
Click the Create button.
Okay.
When it's done, you'll click Select Project in the little notification window. And your screen should look like mine.
Okay. Whoa.
So once your project is created, it should show you your project name up here, right beside the word Google Cloud Platform. If not, you can always click it and you should be able to then find and select your project. If it somehow the project creation failed, you can click New Project here and try again. So once we're here, we want to go to the APIs section. So you can either get there from here, or you can just click on the Go to APIs overview. And it takes us here. It will show us a whole bunch of metrics. There's no data because our project's brand new. So we're going to go to this link over on the left. You'll see this navigation bar under APIs and services. We're going to start with our OAuth consent screen. And again, I've documented all of this in the PowerPoint slides that are on Blackboard, so you have this for reference. And we are recording, so you can always watch this again if you need to. So click on OAuth consent screen. And it wants to know which Google users are we going to allow, internal to our organization or external, meaning any Google account. So I'm going to pick external. Thank you, Jordan. Right? As long as it's a valid Google account, anybody can use it. So just choose external in the user type. Again, we're on the OAuth consent screen. Click the Create button. So you can see a preview on the right of what this does. It's giving us a preview of what that Google sign-in screen is going to look like. It'll have the Google logo, so sign in with Google. And then whatever we call our project over here is going to show up in this heading. It'll say, you know, your app name wants access to your Google account. Select what, again, the app name can access. So for the app name, I'll call it Positive Pets. So that's going to show up everywhere in this preview screen that the word display name appears. There's only 3 fields here we're going to complete. We're going to ignore the rest of them. So put in an app name. We're only going to deal with the required field, the user support email. I'm just going to pick the email that's attached to my Google account. Do not upload a logo. If you upload a logo, then Google will want to review this whole process. Like they're not going to activate your API right away. If you put in a logo, Google wants to review the logo and make sure it meets their standards. So do not include a logo. Leave it blank. The app domain, we're leaving it blank because we don't have our own domain. This would be for on a live website. On positivepets.ca, if we owned that domain, well, yeah, then we would put that stuff in here. But we don't have our own domain. We're going to leave it blank. Same with the authorized domains. We're going to leave that. The only other required field is down at the bottom, which is the developer contact email. So again, I'm just going to use the email address of my Google account. So this would be, sometimes Google changes their APIs and services, or they're having a service outage or a security breach. So they need to send an email to any developers who have created applications in the portal. So this is just a developer contact email. So again, you're filling out only 3 text boxes, the only 3 that are marked with stars. App name and user support email, those are the first 2 inputs. And then the very last input at the bottom, the developer contact info. We're going to leave everything else on this screen blank. So when you're done filling out those 3 inputs, click Save and Continue. You can see there's 4 steps here. So I've put in my Google email twice. I've just put in an app name. I'll click Save and Continue to go to the next step. So it now wants us to configure the scope. So what permissions are we requesting from Google users, and what kind of private user data from their Google account do we want. We are going to do this at the least invasive level. So we're going to click this Add or Remove Scopes button here at the top. It's really the only option we have on this page. So click this button. It shows us a whole bunch of options of what information about someone's Google account we could ask for. We really only care about their email address, which is the first item in the list. Pardon me, the scope is called Auth, userinfo.email. See the primary Google account email address. So just check that first item here. We're not interested in any of this other data, personal info about the Google users. So check that first box that says userinfo.email and just scroll down to the bottom and you can click the blue update button. All we need is their email address because they'll need to use that in our pet store as their sign-in. I'm going to click on update, and it now it considers the email a non-sensitive scope, so it adds it here under the API, under the non-sensitive API scope. And then again, we'll just click the white Save and Continue button at the bottom. We don't need test users. So by default, when we create this project, Google puts it in the testing status. When it's in testing status, it says only test users can log in. And it up to a maximum of 100 people. We're going to kind of bypass this, so don't do anything here. Just click Save and Continue. It gives a summary of the options we've created. We're allowing external Google users in. Our app name I've called Positive Pets, and I've configured the support email and contact email. And the only allowed scope is the user email. So I don't have to change anything here. This is just a summary of the options that we've picked. So I'll just click back to dashboard. And I need to make one more change here. Notice the status. It's in testing mode. So in testing, the Google logins won't work only for authenticated users, only for user email addresses that I specify. Once I put it into production, it says the app will be available to anyone with a Google account. So that's what we want. So by default, it says the status is testing. And then we've got this little white button underneath that says Publish App. So I want to click this button to publish the app, meaning any Google account can sign in. So once I click this, the status is going to change from testing to in production. So I'm going to click that. It'll bring up a little pop-up window. Do we want to push to production? The app will be available to any user with a Google account. That's what we want. I'm going to click Confirm in this little pop-up. And now our status has changed from testing to in production. If you want to put it back to testing status, you would click that button. So these are all the steps to configure the consent. So the Oauth is a standard protocol for authentication, HTTP authentication between different applications. So we're done in this section, the OAuth consent screen. We now need to go to the credentials section, the credentials link above it. So I'm going to click credentials here on the left. And we can see we don't have any credentials yet. So we're going to need to create a set of credentials, a set of credentials for the OAuth client ID. So the only option here on this screen is this blue create credentials link with a plus sign up here on the kind of secondary navigation bar. So let's go ahead and click that. And what we want is to create an OAuth client ID. It requests user consent so our app can access the user data. So click on OAuth client ID under this create credentials option. And it wants a little bit of information from us. The first thing is what kind of application is going to be integrating with the Google app. So we've got different options here, and of course we want web application. It gives it a default name of Web Client 1. That's fine, we can leave it. You can change it if you like, but not necessary. The other thing we have to do here is enter the redirect URIs. What are these? Users will be redirected to this path after they've authenticated with Google. The path will be appended with an authorization code for access and must have a protocol. So it has to be a fully qualified address. Now, the way we're going to do it in the pet store is slightly different from the way you're going to do it in your assignment. For the pet store, I'm going to click on Add URI. And it's going to be localhost, for me, 4438. Sorry, 44338, because that's my pet store URL, 44338. And then at the end of that, I'm going to add sign in -Google. Now for you, I'm going to put it in the chat. You can see me typing as well. So for you, your local host will be the same, except you may have different numbers. Those last two numbers are assigned randomly by Visual Studio when you create the project. So make sure you replace in your redirect URI, replace those two X's with your own port number that your pet store is running on. It won't necessarily be 44338. Might be 443 and any other 2 digits afterwards. So this is going to work locally. In order for this to work for your assignment, you'll also need to add the URI to Azure or Smarter ASP. So for your assignment, it would be something like, myproject.azurewebsites.net, and again, /signin-Google. And you would be replacing the my project with your own URL. So you'd need to add them both for your assignment. And then you just click the create button. Our work in the Google console is now done. So we had to create a project, we had to configure the OAuth consent screen, and we had to create the OAuth client. That includes our redirect URIs. It now gives us this pop-up window with a set of API keys. It's got a client ID and a client secret. We're going to need to now perform some work in our Visual Studio project so that we can integrate our Positive Pets web project with the Google API we've just created in the Google console. So they can talk to each other, and that will enable Google Sign-In to work. I'm going to keep this screen open with my keys. If you've clicked OK, if you've gotten the screen, you've clicked OK and closed it, don't worry. We can still view our web client and view the keys. So I'm going to leave this screen up, and then I'm going to go to Visual Studio. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to appsettings.json, and I'm going to add a section in here to store the Google keys. So down here on line 12, I think everybody's got the same line 12. It says allowed hosts with a star. That's the end of our values in appsettings.json. I'm going to put a comma at the end of it. And then I'm going to add a new JSON section called authentication. I'm going to put my Google credentials here, and later you're going to add your Facebook credentials for your lab. So in here, I'm going to add a Google section. And inside of the Google section, I'm going to add two values, client ID and client secret. And for now, I'll just initialize those as empty strings. So I'm setting up a place in the project where I can add the API keys that we just generated in the Google console. So far, I've added this that's highlighted in blue after the allowed hosts with the star value. So right before our closing curly bracket. What do you suppose our next step in this process is going to be? What should we do once we've created the Google authentication section in our configuration file? Yeah, exactly, Cole. We're going to go back to the Google console and we'll copy and paste the client ID and client secret into here. So I'll copy the client ID. I'll paste it in. So it's going to end with the suffix apps.googleusercontent.com. And then I'll go and do the same thing with the client secret. Copy that. So the client secret is shorter, and it typically starts with geo. Probably start with this prefix of geo CSPX. But the rest of your values are going to be different from mine. Now, somebody may not have this window, or you've already closed it. So how do you get the keys if you've already closed it? You can just go, the word web client 1 here, that's a link. You can just click it to view the details. And then the client ID and client secret are here at the top right. You can always change the secret. Let's say your Google app gets hacked, something like that. You can regenerate the client secret if you need to, or if you need to change the redirect URIs, you just click on it and then you can edit this. Okay, so you can get your API keys from here. Again, if you just go back to your list and click on the web client. So there's 3 steps in Visual Studio. We've done the first step. The first step was add the Google API keys to appsettings.json. That was step 1. Step 2, we need to install a library from the NuGet package manager. We need to install the code library that will do most of the work to process Google sign-in. So I'm going to click on, we can see right now in our project in Solution Explorer, under Dependencies and Packages, here are all of the code libraries. We didn't add any of these. Visual Studio added them automatically when we set the project up. So we've got the library for working with SQL Server. We've got several libraries for managing identity and security. So now we're going to add a new library. So I'm going to click on Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and then I'm going to choose Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. And so follow this menu path, Tools menu at the top, NuGet Package Manager in the middle, and manage the NuGet packages for the solution also in the middle. That's going to pop open a new window we haven't probably seen before. So it takes us to the NuGet window. NuGet is the name of Microsoft's package manager. So it shows us the same 6 libraries that are added to our project, and it defaults to the Installed tab. Tells us there's actually an update. So these are green because we've got the latest version. The little blue tells us there's an update available. We're not going to worry about that for now. We're going to click on the Browse tab on the left. And we're going to search for Microsoft .ASP.NET Core .authentication.google. I've put it in the chat. It brings up 3 packages that could be used. We want this one at the top. Almost 49 million downloads of this Google library. We click on it here, so it highlights. And then this little window opens on the right asking us which project do we want to install this in. Well, we've only got one project. So if I check it, the install button now becomes enabled. So again, when it first opens, you can't click install. You just have to check your project. As soon as you check the Positive Pets project, the install button tells us this project, this library is not currently installed. Do you want to install the latest stable version? We do. So click install. It says it's going to change our solution. Are we okay with this? I'm going to click OK. And then there is a license from Microsoft, license terms, which I will accept. So now it tells us that version 5.0.11 is installed. If I go to the back to the installed tab, it's now got a green checkbox. And now we can see instead of 6 packages, we now have 7. And the Google library, authentication library has now been added to our project. So you'll need to install this into your assignment as well.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I've managed to install just Microsoft ASP.NET Core .authentication.google for some reason.
Yep. The others are still there. Chris, you probably still have the name here, right? Because the name stays in the search box. So so does yours look like this? If you just clear the search, it then shows you everything. So as long as that word is in the top, it filters the results.
Got it.
So if you clear the search, you can now see everything again. So not to worry, it's working properly. So that was step 2, install the code library we need. Step 3 is now to enable it. So if I go and click on register and login, it's still saying there's no external services configured. So we've installed the library, but we have to do a little bit of coding to activate Google Sign-In using those keys. So putting the keys here and installing the package, that was the setup. But now in our startup file, we need to write a little bit of code to activate Google Sign-In. And that's going to happen inside our configure services method. So we worked with this method in our last class. We made a few changes to it. We modified the require confirm account property. It defaulted to true. We changed it to false. And we also added line 37 for role management. So we're going to add a little bit of code at the bottom of this method to enable Google Sign-In. So we're enabling the Google login with the NuGet package that we just added and the API keys that we've put in app settings.json. So we're going to call services.add. We're going to add an authentication method. And then we can chain on here. We're going to add Google. And we're going to set up, we need to set up a couple of options here. So those options, what options do you think the Google service needs? What information are we going to have to include? What configuration values does Google want in order for us to use it, use the service we created? Nope, not the username and password. Good guess, Ralph. Right, we've got to pass our Google API keys into this. So we need to set the client ID. We're going to have to read these values from our configuration. So we'll call configuration.getValue. Which is going to be authentication, Google. Oh, we may have to specify this as a string. Bear with me for a second. Okay, I think it will take it that way, so convert it as a string. The colons are because these sections are nested. So we had an authentication section, the Google section is inside, and the client ID value is inside of that. So that's how we got authentication, underneath it Google, underneath it client ID. We may have to change the syntax a little bit, but I think this should work. Our client secret. Same thing, we'll read from our configuration as a string. So this code will run whenever our application starts. We're enabling Google, and we are passing to it the credentials. I'll show you what happens. We'll try and get this to run, and then we'll see what happens if I change the credentials in app settings. We may need to tweak this a little bit, but let's try it. So now, both my register and login, that message that there were no external providers is gone, and instead I get a Google button. So when I click it, that's interesting, redirect. Okay, let's see what's going on. 44338. I didn't expect that. Thank you. Good catch, Mike. It should be sign in -Google. So that URI, that address is baked into the Google NuGet package that we installed. It has to be sign in -Google. Thank you. So now it says, here's our OAuth consent screen with our project name. It says Google will share my name and email, positive pets. And then it says I've successfully authenticated with Google. Please confirm the email to finish logging in. So I'll click register. And now I'm logged in with a Google account. I'm not an administrator, but I am logged in. If I go and look in my database for a moment, we're going to see that this account is kind of split between a couple of tables. So if I look in my ASP.NET users table first, I should have a new record in there with my Ontario Tech email. So I'll look at ASP.NET users. So here was our admin and our 2 customer accounts. And now I've got username with my Google email address. Notice the password is blank. So Google doesn't send us the user's passwords. So the ID for my new account starts with 4C7. If I look at the ASP.NET user logins table, I've now got one Google login for that user. So I can see, if I have different login providers, I can see who are all of the users who sign in to my site with Google, who signs in with Facebook, who signs in with Twitter, for example. So this user account is split into the ASP.NET users, and then some of the info also spills over into the ASP.NET user logins table. So this process of setting up that application in the Google console, creating the API keys, putting in the redirect URI, that's the Google end of it. And then in Visual Studio, we need the configuration in app settings. We need to install the Google authentication library, and we need to enable it when our project starts. Now, what happens if these values aren't correct? Let me just put something at the end here. Something wrong. So I'm going to save that. I'll log out. And now if I go to register or log in, the Google button's still here. My service is still enabled. And now I get this, right? Invalid client if either the ID and secret here, they have to match exactly the values in our Google console. So it's a way of Google making sure that our web application should have access to this Google service. Right? It uses the client ID and client secret instead of like a username and password to ensure that our app is allowed in to use this Google service. So if those IDs don't match, you're going to get this error that the OAuth client was not found. Now there's one small gotcha on your assignment if you cannot use Azure and you have to host on smarterasp.net. In that case, because we don't have SSL on smarterasp.net, actually Google, I think, will allow it. So never mind, it's only for your lab. For your lab, and never mind, I think it's actually okay. So I'm going to give you your lab now. So for next week, here's what I want you to do. There is a quiz for this week. You should have implemented Google authentication in your store. So if you weren't able to continue together, that's fine, but please refer to the lesson video and the slides on Blackboard. You have a week to complete the week 8 activity. So it's a small lab. You can do it on your own. You can do it with one classmate, or you can do it with 2 classmates. What I want you to do is to implement Facebook login. The description is right here in the tutorial site from Microsoft. The process is fairly similar to Google. You'll have to go to the Facebook developer page. You'll have to create a new app. It will ask you what type of app. It doesn't matter. You can pick any of the options. It won't affect what we are doing. You're then going to add a product. You're going to add Facebook login. You're going to have to put in a redirect URI. So it's going to be signin-Facebook instead of signin-Google. It will generate an app ID and an app secret for you. One other thing you need to do on Facebook, just like on Google, we change the mode from testing to production. On Facebook, you have to change the mode from, they call it development to production. But they have one extra step. They won't let you put your Facebook app into production unless you provide the URL to a privacy policy. So you can just use, https georgiancollege.ca. So you can put that in as the URL to the privacy policy. They won't let you change your app from development to production without a privacy policy. So Google doesn't insist on this, but Facebook does. So to submit your lab, you're going to upload your Positive Pet store to a private GitHub repository and invite me. Submit the link on Blackboard. If you are working with 1 or 2 classmates, make sure in Blackboard you put everybody's name in the submission. So I will grade everybody. Okay, so you only have to make 1 submission per your group, but make sure you share the code so each of you have the code. Okay. If you want to do this by yourself, that's fine. Just go ahead and do it on your own. Push your pet store to GitHub, send me the link. You don't have to deploy this to Azure or smarterasp.net. Okay? Running it locally is fine. Okay, so use the tutorial link. You can ignore the storing the keys in Secret Manager. You can just store them in appsettings.json. You'll need to install the Facebook NuGet package. And then you'll need to write the code in startup to enable the Facebook authentication as well. Okay, so you have a week to do this. Won't take very long. Does anybody have any questions about the lab? You don't have to do it in class. You have until next Wednesday at 5 o'clock to do it. Okay, I will post the videos for today's class probably within the next hour when they're done processing. So please ensure if you do the lab with someone else, make sure that your submission has everyone's name on it. Only one person needs to submit though. I will give everybody else the grades as long as I know who is working with who. If you want to do it on your own, that's fine. David, you'll be happy to know this was originally designed as a breakout room activity. I've decided to still let you collaborate, but you're not required to.
Good afternoon, sir. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So my Positive Pets website, it is quite left behind. So would it be okay if I do the lab on the website, like the project website? Is that an option? Can I do that?
Can you implement Facebook login in yes, in your assignment? If you need to, yes, you can. Jordan, no, it doesn't matter. I'm not marking the rest of the pet store. So as long as you get the Facebook login to work, that's all you need to do for the lab. That's fine.
Okay, yeah, that was my question. So thank you, sir.
All right, so that's all for today. I'm going to stop the recording. Like I said, I will post the code up to GitHub shortly, so you can reference the Google login, and I'll post the videos. Okay, so make sure you've got your quiz and Facebook login due before next week's class, 5 p.m. on Wednesday. Okay, have a great weekend. It's supposed to be nice and sunny. We'll see you all next Thursday. If you need help, shoot me an email or book an office hours appointment.